Hello, everyone, and welcome to All Raiders Talk, episode 15. This is going to be the Raiders 53 man roster first guesses. I am your host, Hunter. I'm just a fan of the Raiders who enjoys talking Raiders football, so hope you enjoy the conversation. I can also be found on YouTube, Twitter, X, or wherever you listen to your podcasts at All Raiders Talk as well. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the 53 man roster, which is going to be basically looking at our 90 man roster, breaking it down as far as each position and who I think is actually going to be on the roster come cut down day to where we have 53 total players. So, with that said, the first is going to be the actual quarterback position. I only have two quarterbacks making the 53 man roster, and that's going to be Kirk Cousins and Fernando Mendoza. I do think there's a possibility that Aiden O'Connell does stay. I do think he's a good kind of like, clipboard quarterback as far as like helping Fernando and making sure that like he has all the tools and everything he needs from like a quarterback perspective as far as like someone in the actual quarterback room. Some of that will come from Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins, from everything that's kind of what he's done, is more of like he just wants to lead by example, not necessarily like bring a guy along. So so Fernando can definitely learn from Kirk Cousins, but maybe want to have someone like Aiden O'Connell to kind of walk alongside him, kind of show him more, a little bit of the ropes here and there. So that might be something that kind of happens, but I don't think they'll necessarily carry 53. Either O'Connell might get traded, or if he doesn't get traded and he just gets released, then I could see him bringing on the actual practice squad, or if they decide to keep Clark, the rookie undrafted free agent that we signed, maybe he'll make the practice squad. But I think it's going to be just these two quarterbacks. And of course, Kirk Cousins is going to probably play a decent portion of the season, depending on how the season goes. Like if we're playing just like really well and like playoff contention, then I think Kirk Cousins is going to stay playing quarterback for most, if not the entire year. But if we're 2-6 or something, and it's just not looking great with Cousins, then I think we may see Mendoza come in at that point in time and actually go from there. Of course, Mendoza is going to be the future of the franchise, so he is going to be the guy for the future. But from all things that have been reported, it's going to be Kirk Cousins' job to lose, essentially, through the start of the year and throughout the actual season. But those are the only two I see actually making the 53-man roster. Next, as we get into running backs here, I also included the fullback. I have four total. So I have Ashton Genty, Mike Washington Jr., Dylan Lobby, and then fullback Connor Hayward. So, of course, Ashton Genty is going to be an obvious one. He's going to be our primary back, probably getting 70% of the touches as far as for running back. Mike Washington is going to be the backup. He's probably going to have that 20 to 25% touch rate just because Clint Kubiak's system does like to play two running backs, and maybe that comes more close to like 60-30 in like 10% of like Lobby or something like that, or maybe it's like 60-35-5 or something. So maybe start getting a little bit more of touches for like Washington or Lobby, and you get a little less for Genty, but I think it's going to be kind of somewhere in that range. I did still choose Lambe just because of special teams play. He does play on, kickoff return, punt return, and he's able to, not only make tackles, but he's also able to catch, kind of gain yardage and everything there. So it's something where I did kind of think between like Roman Hemby, the undrafted free agent rookie out of Indiana, as far as someone who could also like come in and kind of be a big bruising back and kind of take a few snaps away, but I'm not sure about him being like special teams. And so if you're looking at like, this player who's not going to get very many snaps, how do they benefit the 53-man roster? And that's where I look at special teams. And that's why I still think Lambe, despite, is being a very minimum touch guy, I think he can play special teams and just kind of give you a few snaps here and there as far as like as a running back. And Connor Hayward, he's going to be a fullback / tight end. He's going to see his snaps as far as not sure how many, but he's going to be there. We didn't really bring anyone in that I think is going to kind of overtake Hayward. Like there was a few fullbacks kind of in the draft that I thought, like the one from Indiana that I thought if they drafted could very much take a spot. That didn't kind of end up happening. So Hayward doesn't really have any competition. I mean, he's not going to see a ton of snaps, but he'll see enough snaps. But that's as far as who I have as far as the running back and fullback position. Next, as we go into wide receivers, I have, 6 of them. It's going to be like Jalen Naylor, Trey Tucker, Jack Besh, Dante Thornton Jr., Malik Benson, and Derek Young. So these are going to be the 6 I have. I also have a note. I think Chase Roberts is going to be just on the outside looking in. I do think there's a possibility that, like, let's say they don't need the special team from Young because they have Benson and because they have someone like Laube who could also take snaps, and because you have Tucker who can also do punt returns. So it's something where maybe Young is kind of the odd man out, and so that's when like someone like Chase Roberts can come in and fit into that kind of final slot. So that's kind of just a little bit of a note I have. But for the meantime, I'm going to have, like I said, these ones here. So, of course, you have Jalen Naylor, who's probably going to be kind of even though I'd say he's probably closer to a number 2 wide receiver, I think he's going to be mostly our number 1 receiver, kind of playing a little bit of everywhere. Trey Tucker is going to have your kind of your deep threat, kind of your over the middle, kind of like he played this last year. Jack Besh is going to be your little bit of your bigger body kind of wide receiver, kind of a blocking wide receiver. We hope we see a lot more from him this year. He didn't play a ton of snaps last year. Dante Thornton Jr. has all the talent, like physical talent in the world, but his just route running wasn't very good. He had a little bit of issues with drops and kind of following the ball deep. So we'll be really interested to kind of see what he does in his second year, but I still think he has enough talent, and I do, especially for where he was drafted, that I think he's going to have no issues kind of making the roster. Malik Benson and Derek Young, I do think there's a possibility that only one of these 2 guys kind of makes it, because they both are going to offer kind of return ability and that kind of just 4th or 5th string kind of wide receiver. So it's something where maybe they only choose to pick one of them, which is why, like I said, I think I'm a fan of Chase Roberts as far as like if you're looking for a big body kind of receiver type, then maybe that someone like him can kind of drop in. But otherwise, the rookie Benson and Young are both kind of compete for that kind of special team spot and kind of last wide receiver on the roster. Maybe both of them make it, and like I said, I have both of them making it here, but that's just something to keep in mind. As we get into it next, there's the tight end. There's only just 3 tight ends total. Brock Bowers, of course, Michael Mayer, and then Ian Thompson. There's really not too much behind those 3 guys anyway. I do think 3's maybe a little low, especially because they want to run a lot of 12 personnel, which plays a lot of 2 tight end sets. It's something, they have like Carter Runyon is going to be a name who I think is probably going to be on the practice squad. They did also sign like Matt Lauder, a tight end, as an undrafted free agent. He also has a decent chance to make the practice squad. If they had someone else kind of like a more true blocking tight end, I maybe would have added a 4th one. That's kind of what Connor Hayward is going to be able to do there, so maybe that kind of already counts for that, but that's just something as far as keep in mind is I think 3 is a little light for 12 personnel as far as, especially if they're going to be kind of rotating some of those guys in, and just so like I said, Carter Runyon might be someone who could make to 53 if you're not counting like Connor Hayward as far as that 4th tight end. As we get into finishing up on the offensive side of the ball, this is going to be our O-line. I have 9 O-linemen. So Colton Miller, Jackson Powers Johnson, Tyler Linderbaum, Caleb Rogers, DJ Glaze, Charles Grant, Trey Zune III, Jordan Meredith, and Dalton Wagner. Nothing too surprising there. Maybe only Spencer Bedford, the offensive line that we signed from San Francisco, not making my 53 here. I think there's maybe a decent chance that he makes it over like a Meredith or a Wagner. So it's something where maybe that's just because I like some of these guys a little bit more. 9, I think, is a good number, just because you typically want a couple extra, and there's still kind of a lot of guys as far as like who's going to take over some of these positions. I do think it's probably going to be JPJ and Rogers who earn the guard spots, and I do think Glaze will earn that right tackle spot, we'll see what happens with Charles Grant and whether or not he can actually take over that right tackle spot from Glaze, but I think it's Glaze's job to lose. Trey Zune will compete for one of the guard spots. I do think it'll probably, like I said, end up with JPJ and Rogers, and then Zune will be kind of the flex center slash guard as far as like the first one. And so if Linderbaum ever has to come off the field, I think it's gonna be Zune who's gonna be that first one to come in and at the center position. And then really, like Jordan Meredith, I know he wasn't very good last year, but they had him playing center. If you move him back to guard, maybe there's going to be some better improvement. And then as far as like just kind of having additional flex tackle, Dalton Wagner's been here 2, 3, 4 years now. Is just kind of a rotational offensive lineman. I do still like his size and some of his mobility, so we'll see. Maybe someone else kind of makes that fifth spot, or maybe they only carry 8, and Dalton Wagner kind of makes it back to the practice squad. So that's going to be all the kind of the offensive 53 as far as the players I think are going to make 53 on the offensive side of the ball. So we'll start getting to it on the defense, and this is going to be like your defensive lines, last edges here. I know we're going to be running a 3-4 base, so I just put edges because that could be like a 4-3, a 3-4 edge, or outside linebacker who's really an edge rusher. So I just kind of grouped all the kind of edges together here, and that's so. With our D-line, I have Thomas Booker IV, Adam Butler, Jonah Lelu, Brandon Cleveland, J.J. Pezice, Tonka Hemingway, Max Crosby, Kwity Paye, Keon Crawford, Malcolm Kuntz, and Charles Snowden. Nothing really fancy with any of these names. The only one that's kind of new is going to be Brandon Cleveland, just because I do think they'll likely end up with, it's either going to be between like him and then maybe like Gary Smith, the nose tackle that we signed from UCLA as far as an undrafted free agent. But otherwise, nothing kind of special here with these names. I don't think there's really anyone else that kind of really stood out. As far as maybe taking a spot. I know Charles Snowden, I do kind of like as your 4th or 5th rotational kind of edge, but maybe like someone like Jeffrey Harvey, maybe like Sloan, one of our other undrafted free agent rookies, kind of over him. That would be like the only one that's kind of like really as like an unknown as far as maybe if someone else was going to take one of the spots, that would be it. But overall, I think this kind of what we're going to be looking for, with Booker being a 3-4 edge or 3-4 end, Lulu probably playing a 3-4 end, and then Butler, Cleveland, and Bezice kind of playing that nose tackle, defensive tackle. Because even though we are playing a base 3-4, if we are trying to run like Seattle Styles defense, they only use like base 3-4 and like 6% of their snaps. So it's something where we'll still see a lot of D tackles and not necessarily a ton of nose tackle. So it's something where seeing more D tackles than nose tackles is fine, and just because it's not going to be as commonly played. So that's going to be our D-line / edges. As we go into the next group, it's going to be our linebackers. That's going to be 5 total. I have Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Tommy Eichenberg, Cody Lindenberg, and then Segun Olabu. So first we have kind of your starters, Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker. Those are kind of pretty straightforward. As far as behind them, there's not a lot of great option. Tommy Eichenberg has kind of flashed a little, but he's been mostly special teams. Cody Lindenberg's been flashed a little, mostly special teams. Segun Olabu he signed from the Colts. He was a free agent, but he was also mostly just kind of a special teams kind of player. So it's something where we really have like 2 starters and like 3 mostly kind of special teams guys. But that's kind of what you're going to expect to see a lot with the linebacker position, just because you may have times where you only play 1 linebacker. Sometimes you play 2. Rarely do you play more than 2. And so finding ways for the other guys to kind of see the field as far as to have those roster spots, I think that's perfectly fine. The only one I could see is maybe instead of like Lindenberg or Labu, he may have like Sorzy, which is a linebacker, the undrafted free agent linebacker. I do like a little bit. Someone maybe like him, he can make the 53 over. One of the 3 backups here. So that's going to be the linebackers. As we get into it and go to the actual defensive backs. So as far as defensive backs, I have 10, and this is just kind of grouping the cornerbacks and like the safeties kind of together here. So of course we have Eric Stokes, Jermon McCoy, Darian Porter, Hezekiah Massis, Taron Johnson, Camion Richardson, Traden Stukes, Jeremy Chin, Isaiah Palamau, and then Dalton Johnson. The one thing to keep in mind with this group is if McCoy does need surgery and it's going to be out for the year, then of course he wouldn't be on this total. He wouldn't be part of this 10, and then he may have someone else kind of taking over one of those spots. So that's something where maybe they decide to actually carry 11 defensive backs and only four linebackers because the fact that, they may be worried about McCoy not making it or maybe not playing throughout the year. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind there. I do think it's probably going to be Eric Stokes. Eric Stokes is going to be the first starter. If McCoy is healthy and does play, I do think he likely is just the second starter. I do like Darian Porter, and it'll be really kind of interesting to see how he actually grows throughout this offseason and as far as like his second NFL season. But I do think McCoy, if healthy, which of course is the big question mark and everything. So if McCoy is ready, I think McCoy does earn that second spot, and then Porter comes that third corner. And then Taron Johnson is going to be more of like your slot corner, play also maybe a little bit of dime linebacker, kind of depending on the situation. Then we really have, like I said, Traden Stukes, Jeremy Chin, as far as going to be your main starters as far as safeties go. Stukes can also play some, like, nickel corner. I know in, like, mini camp that's been going on right now, they did have Stukes playing a little bit of, like, corner style as far as in that goes. But I do think, like I said, he'll probably play mostly safety. And then you have Paul Amal as far as kind of probably you kind of want to push to be more of a backup role, and then Dalton Johnson, who's going to be a little bit more special teams as far as also kind of a backup role there. And that's just going to be as far as the rest of the actual defensive guys here. And then as we get into it, just 3 special team spots here, and this will kind of knock out the last of the actual 53 itself. So, of course, we're going to have A.J. Cole, which is going to be our, all-pro punter. As far as kickers go, I actually do have Kenzie Matsuo, the Tokyo Toe, actually taking the actual 53-man kicking spot over Matt Gay. Matt Gay just doesn't offer anything special as far as a kicker goes, and he's a bit older. I mean, I know Matsuo isn't necessarily a young kicker either, even though he's a rookie, but I don't see anything that Matt Gay really offers outside of just NFL experience. They both don't necessarily have like great legs either. Matsuo, only having a long of 52, but maybe there's more there. Maybe they just didn't have him kick longer than that in Hawaii. But, I mean, if we're going to have kind of 2 very similar kickers, give me the younger kicker. Give me one who I think is going to have more upside, and like I said, Kenzie Matsuo. And then as far as with that goes, I don't really see, there was nothing special kind of about Alex Ward, so I do think the undrafted free agent rookie Tyler Dzonski is going to take the actual long snapper spot, so that will kind of give us 2 undrafted free agents actually making the 53-man roster, and the only 2 that I have actually making the 53 outside of maybe Chase Roberts if they only have like one of Malik Benson or Derek Young. So these are the only 2 undrafted free agents I see actually making the roster. But talking about as far as undrafted free agents, I'm going to actually kind of talk a little bit about the actual practice squad as far as who are some of the names I think will actually make the practice squad here. Practice squad does have 16. I didn't feel it was 16 just because usually ends up being about 10 to 12, like actual guys from year 53 or year 90 man, and then along with a couple others. So some of the names that I think have a decent shot to come back as far as on our practice squad after we do our 53-man roster. Jacob Klopp, quarterback, Romain Hemby, running back. Like I said, I do think if they have enough special teams guys, maybe Hemby makes it over Labe. If they feel they don't need law-based special teams ability, so Chase Roberts, if you need that bigger bodied wide receiver and you want someone who's actually going to have that kind of that larger body size and have them on the 53, then maybe Chase Roberts makes it over one of the kind of more special teams wide receivers. EJ Williams, Jr., wide receiver, I think just because of his experience in Indiana and being with Fernando Mendoza, it's usually nice to kind of have like one of of those kind of targets as far as in the passing game. So just kind of having someone like that probably is a good fit for him. Carter Runyon, tight end, like I said, he's a little bit more of a pass catcher as far as that's a lot of what he did last year with us as a rookie. I do think there's a possibility that he could make the roster as far as the 53 if they want 4 tight ends. So that would be kind of one to take a look at. Isaiah Jetta and Justin Pickett as far as and Spencer Burford as far as old linemen on the actual practice squad. I do think that so there's a chance that Spencer Burford does make our 53. I'm not as high on him, so like I put him in our practice squad, but it's something where I could see it kind of really going either way. And Jetta and Pickett are just kind of undrafted free agents where you start kind of trying to build up some of these younger players and start rotating some of your older practice squad players with some of these newer guns. Next is going to be, like I said, there's Gary Smith III. Like I said, this is going to be, I think it's between Brandon Cleveland and Gary Smith III as far as who's going to take that true, like, nose tackle, like, rookie role. I'd put Cleveland as far as giving the edge because he was actually drafted over Smith. But it's something I wouldn't be surprised if, like, Gary Smith earned that spot over Cleveland because they both are very similar players. I really think it could go kind of either way. Traven May. It's kind of just another second-year defensive tackle, nose tackle type. Xavier Swarzy Jr., as far as the linebacker, this is one of the linebackers that I thought has the possibility of kind of making it, especially with special teams, over one of the 5 linebackers, like a Lobby, Lindenberg or Eichenberg. So it's something where he would be one of the other surprise players I think could make the actual 53. And then really after that, we have Tanner Wall, safety from BYU. I know a lot of people kind of like him. Maybe he can kind of make it over maybe over Dalton. I don't think so, but it's something where I know some people really like him. I actually didn't list it here, but because I actually had him originally on the 53, but I took it off because I had too many. Tristan McCollum, I think, would be here on the practice squad as well as far as a safety. So even though he's not listed here on the visual side of things, that would also be a name I think would make the practice squad. Greedy Vance, there just really wasn't a spot for him, especially with Taron Johnson as far as in that slot. We have Trayton Seuss who can play the slot a little bit as well. So it's something where I know Dalton Johnson has also played a little bit of slot. So I just didn't really have a great spot for Greedy Vance, but I did kind of like him a little bit in the slot last year. So that was just kind of one to kind of keep in mind. And then finally, this is more of an IPP player. He doesn't count for like the 16-man practice squad, but Laki Tossi, they actually moved him back to defensive tackle. He actually was on the offensive line last year, or he was usually brought in as a D tackle. They moved him to offensive line. He showed a little bit on the offensive line as far as during the preseason, but of course with the different coaching staff and a different kind of run scheme system, Tossi doesn't really fit like a wide zone, so they decided to kind of move him back to the defensive side of the ball. An IPP player doesn't, you can have one that doesn't take up, one of your 90-man spots and also one of your 16-man spots as far as for the actual practice squad. So there's no harm in kind of having at least one of those. That would, if the Tokyo Toe doesn't make the actual roster, then maybe you have someone like him taking over that practice squad spot over Tossi. But I do think, like I said, Mantua can make the 53, and so that's when you have like Tossi taking over the last IPP spot. So overall, that's kind of who I have as far as our 53-man roster, what I think it's probably going to look like at this kind of moment in time. I just kind of want to do a quick overview of kind of what we're looking at full roster-wise, because I do plan to do next is going to be probably a little bit more of kind of some position breakdowns. So I did break some of the position down a little bit here, but I'll probably go a little bit more in depth as we kind of do some of the next videos, doing a little bit more breakdowns. That's kind of what's going to have next on the agenda, unless there's some other mini camp news. I know there's some bits have already kind of come out, but if I feel like there's enough mini camp news to kind of make an actual video just on that, then I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll start kind of creating some specific position breakdowns and kind of going more in depth in position to position. With all that said, I want to thank everyone for watching or listening. Like, comment, subscribe. It's appreciated. Till next time, take care of everyone. Talk to y'all in the next episode. Peace.